Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. The title of today's episode is When Nature Reminds You of Your Truth. And in some sense, there are the questions of what is the value of a lifetime? What can nature remind us of? In some sense, I think most people feel that they have to lift themselves out of certain ways they see themselves in. When nature reminds you of your truth, of your true self, that is when you have found yourself in a moment where your subjective way of seeing the world and your objective way of seeing the world have enough similarity for there to be one world. That means, in some sense, an internal truth is reflected outside, and outside truth is reflected inside. Then there comes a stillness because the agenda of every sub-personality in your consciousness ends. Today, honestly is a special day for me. Kinda, I woke up right when I woke up. I don't know why. I don't even remember the dream, if I had a dream or not. I just woke up and raised my hands in the air, and suddenly I was just like thanking the moment. You see, what many people don't realize is that whenever you talk to someone, your whole moment echoes the design of that communication. And there have been moments where I have prayed, I have, in other words, spoken to this universe, and there have been moments where I have listened. We fundamentally maintain the stories of our life with a certain relationship to the collective system, which means that civilization has a lot to do in how much value it gives to the person. You see, society is like an invisible leader that you automatically listen to, yet you have no choice but to follow, you know? All right, let's make this the concept for this episode more tangible. So, ladies and gentlemen, what I'm pretty much trying to say is that there will come certain moments in your life where you will find no resistance, no inner resistance to the outer, no outer resistance to the inner. That in those moments, you're going to notice the inner reality, your inner life has to do with how you separate yourself from things. The outer life has to do with how all things are happening at once. What I mean by that is that your consciousness is like opens your attention to the stage of your world. And once you find yourself in a stage, it's very easy. Like think of it this way. Think of it as if like before food and water, uh, the being is looking for an identity to seek food and water. And what that means is an identity arises from a world. We, the human species, have arisen from the world. The world was here, nature was here doing its thing, eons of silence, and then mankind opened its eyes and it's like, what the fuck, where am I? That's what I feel like the early humans were. They just opened their eyes and they're like, what the fuck? They just opened their eyes to existence. And so my eyes are open to existence, but there have been times that my eyes have been open to existence, but the sight of my heart has been closed. There's this very nice ancient story. It's about Hafez Shirazi. So Hafez Shirazi, this man was an ancient Persian poet who kept Persian culture alive. Like if you see any Persians around you, you go and ask them about this name. Ones who've lived in Iran for at least more than a year, they would know. They would know about Hafiz, Rumi, Attar, Omar, Khayyam. These people were very crucial to keeping a culture alive, but they kept the culture alive by keeping the most deepest and metaphysical notions of that culture intact. And so they were of course Sufi dervishes. What that means is they were mystics. So believe it or not, out of all the people that helped preserve Persian civilization, some of the most well-known were mystics and poets. Because the task of the poet is that the moment he has stepped into another world to bring that world back. Because that's the only purpose. For me, it's like, okay, I could just sit still all day or I could move. So if I'm going to move, then let's attempt the greatest movements. That's kind of like my view. Because internally the world is void. I'm telling you, internally you'll find yourself in an empty attention that is the moment. It's like in the movement of your attention, manifestation arises into more of a crystallized meaning. That means sometimes to attain. I'll get back to the story from Hafez, but just give me a second. I want to say this. Sometimes mastery, anything you want to master, you just have to repeat. You just have to repeat. And I'll tell you, when I was younger, my the way I perceived my intelligence was that I would do something, it wouldn't make sense. And then I would do it constantly, as if believe it or not, some people succeed when they never have the concept of failure. So they end up being moments of endless energy and effort if directed. And so if you really constantly, every day, pay attention to something, do a certain activity, you're going to eventually become more aware of how that activity changes you. Everything in life changes you. You could be standing by the corner of a bus and somebody could come and say, hey man, you're going to win, da-da, and then the guy's going to leave. Imagine like somebody comes and tells you you're going to win. You're going to go through your normal day, but that idea has now entered the inner universe, and it is sculpting the inner universe based on the emotional preferences that arise from different time periods. And I'll tell you something hilarious. Somebody could come and say, yo, the sophisticated network of, neurons and memories and structures and classifications, as if Napoleon Bonaparte, like that French emperor, in some sense, he would tell some people that he would classify his mind like a drawer. like a sort of file cabinet. Well, it'll bring out a drawer and you'll remember the exact tasks for that special drawer. So you see, there's many different ways. Even for memory competitions, there's like what do they call them? Something memory palaces or something. The guy visualizes walking into different rooms and in each room seeing something unique and therefore remembering all those unique things in the sequence of a journey. So, anyways, I said that there's ways of looking at things with your normal biological eyes. And then there's a way where you look at things from your heart, and your heart does not see form, it sees the emotions that forms exist in. It's the wisdom of your emotional self and the wisdom of your, in some sense, conceptual self finding themselves in your true self. And your true self is like the stage is not acting. The actor on stage is, but the whole stage is not acting. There's a sort of inseparability of the individual activity and the cosmic activity. There will come also an inseparability of the individual truth and the collective truth, but for now they will remain separate because we need fixed personalities in a changing world to attempt to fix the world we saw in it. One can even see the totality of human history as a painting, as if every person who's been born, they've been, in some sense, a certain color, a certain brushstroke on the whole painting, you know. Hafez has this story, this Sufi mystic, ancient Persian poet. He has this story where he had a disciple, and one night, as he writes it in his poems. Um, he says, one night, from the eyes of my heart, with the eye of my heart, Hafez was like in some meditation, and from the eye of his collective self, he in some sense sees a slave. This is back in the day, guys. This is like 700, I don't know, 700 to 900 years ago, some period around there. Okay, and so Hafiz is like this kind of, like, you could say, dervish kind of enlightened fellow. And then he has a disciple, and suddenly in his deep meditation, and he writes down, he says, with the eye of my heart, he suddenly sees something occurring in somewhere else. Like he's just sitting in his room, but he's seeing somewhere some other event with the eye of his heart, and another current event, and he sees that there's this slave. This is back in the day, guys. This is a story from back in the day. Like 700 to 900 years ago. He sees a slave who's somehow found a way to ran away from his oppression and like the household where he was being oppressed in, and the slave runs away and comes to a point where he's hiding in a cave, scared, and constantly just praying to God. God help me, God help me, for me not to go back to that hell. That's the slave. The slave is he's escaped. He's escaped from being a slave, but still has the fears of being pulled back. So what happens is Hafiz immediately sees this, and immediately sees that they don't have that much time to go and free this guy, because the people from the owner, the slave owner, is looking for the slave. So what he does is Hafiz quickly commands his disciple Like he had some guy who was there, like his student or something, and he tells this student, he says, "You have to." He suddenly like gets like some sort of, um, the Persian word for it is elham, which means he receives a sort of knowing. Okay, he receives a sort of knowing, and he looks at his disciple and he says, "You have to go to exactly this cave in this location in this part of like the desert or whatever, and you have to go. There will be a guy who's startled there, and you have to go save this guy who's a runaway slave and bring him here because he needs. Well, he's going to be captured if he stays there." So what he does is, and Hafiz is strange. He's like, if you read his poetry, you will be fascinated of this guy's characteristic. It's as if he's one of those transcendental personalities. And, excuse me. Hafiz tells his student one thing, though. And he says, you cannot speak to this slave. When you go and bring him, you have to go bring him without telling him a single word of what I've told you. Or where he's coming from here, where there's like it's like there was freedom there, like he was gonna, like they were trying to save the slave, because they were a kind of dervishes. They weren't like materialistic oriented people, so they cared to, in other words, free the soul from matter, any matter it was, whether it was slavery or whatever. It's as if their truths were living in a world where there was a greater freedom, and therefore they would effortlessly fight for truth, because they saw a way where the world was at peace. So anyways, not to get too carried off. So what happens is the disciple listens and gets this urgent feeling that he has to go do this, and quickly gets on a horse and goes. Quickly gets on a horse and goes, and he's like, yes, we're going to save this guy, and he gets to the cave. He gets to the cave and sees the guy kind of kneeling down, praying to God to help him. To, in some sense, somebody save him. But the moment he goes in, he remembers, Hafiz told him, the disciple remembers that he can't speak to the guy. He can't tell the guy, you're going to be free. Okay? So guys, if there's any confusions of what's going on in the story, pretty much Hafiz meditates. He sees that he gets this vision that there's this guy in some cave, which was a slave who ran away from his like cruel masters or whatever. And so Hafiz sends his disciple to go get this slave, but tells the disciple, you can't talk to the person you're bringing here. You can't say a single word. So what the disciple does is he gets to the cave and suddenly sees the gaze of horror in the slave's eyes, and he realizes he can't tell the slave. He can't tell the slave he's going to be free. And he just forcefully, in some sense, ties the hand of a slave to this rope, to his horse, and he goes. And the whole time, the disciple is crying. Tears are coming out of his eyes. Because behind him, the slave is like, no, I don't want to go back. No! Like some chaotic cry from the slave. And the disciple starts crying. And guys, this is the moral of the story here. Where the disciple is crying. The disciple is crying because he said he's looking at that slave to that condition and tells the man, you don't understand. You are in suffering. You are shackled by suffering. But you don't realize where you're being taken. And so after a little while, they get to the Hafiz's house, and he frees the slave, and he tells the slave what happened. And the slave is shocked and finds his freedom. And that's the end of the story. That sometimes in life you might be going through a situation where you're like, God, if you're watching, why are you doing nothing? Why? Like when I was younger, I would get into that point. This is why youth are rebellious. But because they can instantly notice authority not abiding by its own rule. And then comes that youthful rage. That youthful rage of trying to bring the justice of a limited, that's the problem. Children have great energy, but they're not that informed experientially. Life is something where you're living with it. It's not you're living with your life. And that's an incredibly strange thing to say, but but what I mean by that is you're living, your eyes are open where there is already somebody, something else in the room. Consciousness is existing in profound ways. It is existing in every symbol that arises in it. For me, there were times where I thought if man was created by a god, man was not meant to be man. Man was meant to be a mirror. I thought existence was the mirror of God. And I still entertain the idea in certain ways. What I mean, existence is the mirror of God. It's as if, what is the purpose of individual consciousness? If me and you right now were to create an AI robot that suddenly became conscious and was like, whoa, what the, like, where am I? You know? That AI we would see is a reflection of how we were made. As if our gods are still wondering about what they are, so their greatest mirror was another world, another world, another world. As if like a domino kind of effect after, if you look at it through a religious context, after Adam and Eve, they're like mess up, like what they messed up. After that, it's as if like a domino effect of realities being thrown into the unknown. As if, imagine like knowledge was a changing world. When nature reminds you of your truth, these are moments where your whole being urges towards an expression rather than certain aspects of your moment. Excuse me, guys, I gotta handle something. سلام بابا، من وسط یه صحبتم، الان نمیتونم برم یه چیزی ضبط میکنم. نمیتونم بابا جون، باید یه چیزی رو ضبط کنم، وسط یه چیزی هم دارم، یه چیزی مهم رو ضبط میکنم. الو سلام، دارم یه چیز مهم رو وصل میکنم، نمیتونم، دارم یه چیز. به مامان بگو ببره، یه چیزی. خودش بگو اوبر بگیره، بگو اوبر بگیره، من وسط یه چیز مهمی هم نمیتونم حرف بزنم، نمیتونم، یادم میره. چقدر آدم نامردی، چقدر آدم نامردی.